Hi everyone again, thank you for being here in the very last session of ISEA2022. We are here with Newman, Robert Fischer and Claudia Carter, and they are presenting a panel implementing STEAM approaches in higher education. STEAM INC is the first focused attempt to collect and codify European approaches to STEAM in higher education. While the work is exploratory and should be not considered comprehensive, the collected approaches can, however, offer a preliminary framework for future mapping of STEAM in higher education, stimulate dialogue about the perceived nature, principles, and parameters of STEAM, and provide inspiration for those looking to develop and introduce STEAM approaches of their own. STEAM is science, technology, engineering, art, and design, and mathematics. If you are not familiar with the topic, please.
Hi, thank you very much for joining us. Was it? Hello.
Hello. No, they're all not working.
The other way around.
It should be working, but it's not. So I just switch the mics.
Hi, thank you for joining us for this last session. Very much appreciated. So we'll be discussing Project STEAM Inc. that we've been working on together. But first of all, kind of want to ask why STEAM, why this approach is necessary for education. And I'll just sort of read a little bit from the intro from our paper to kind of give a context before jumping into the project itself. So a sustainable future will require the ability to perceive possibilities that at present may seem impossible to achieve. Characterized as an effectively unfathomable hyperobject and a wicked problem, the climate crisis has emphasized the need to implement integrative approaches that incorporate an understanding of the complex interdependencies of human, non-human, and more than human systems. This is now perceived as essential. Key UN reports constantly emphasize the need for interdisciplinarity, and STEAM is one approach to kind of emphasizing, promoting, encouraging, and embedding this way of thinking in the way that we work. And what we've been focusing on specifically is how we can integrate this way of thinking in higher education institutions. So I will go to the next slide. And so STEAM Inc. is an Erasmus project, and it's made up of partners from Central St. Martin's, the University of Arts London, Aalto University, Ars Electronica, University of Amsterdam, Trinity College, and Technische Universität Dresden. Joining me today is Robert Fischer from Technische Universität Dresden and Claudia Carter from Birmingham City University, which is the lead partner of the project. So the objectives of the project was to look at sort of developing and mapping sort of innovation and curriculum with uses of STEAM in higher education. The selection of the partners were that each of us were already working and had developed a lot of STEAM methodologies, curricula, and approaches. So we already had ways of working that we first started to map. And this was one of the first outputs of the project, which was the STEAM Inc. STEAM Approaches Handbook. So the objectives of the project were: one, identify points of intersection across European higher education STEAM approaches, develop a collaborative definition of STEAM in higher education; two, produce methodologies for the implementation of STEAM thinking in higher education policy and engagement; and three, create an evaluation framework to measure the effectiveness of these STEAM processes in HE institutions. We have gone through 1 and 2 currently, and are just starting the third objective. We will focus on the approaches a little bit at the beginning of this panel, and then also go into more detail some of the methodologies that we have developed at each of our institutions. So I might then pass on to Claudia to go into the STEAM Inc. Definition, working principles, that she was the lead author on a paper that kind of started to map what we mean when we define STEAM.
Yeah, so our first workshop was literally coming together for the first time. So some of us knew each other because we came from a design thinking background in a previous Erasmus project and came up with the idea of this project. But then we had to come we were a bit anti having a definition and putting into place, but we also felt that what really makes STEAM STEAM. So because inter and transdisciplinarity was used, but also multidisciplinarity and cross-disciplinarity, and there was no clarity. So we'll come back to that later. But also, we just shared experiences of what to us described STEAM, because some of our institutions did not officially use STEAM. And I think that's also, you might find, oh, what I'm doing is also STEAM. Oh, I just hadn't thought about it. And I think that's a really important point. So I did not come from STEAM. I came into the project, but I see myself as a transdisciplinary researcher. And then my colleagues who came from STEAM and helped develop it in my university said, yeah, but you need to be STEAM, not just transdisciplinarity. So we came up with that set of characteristics that we said, these should not just be cherry-picked, but ideally, all of them should actually be part of a STEAM approach. And I think that's also something that was quite important. So it's not just cherry-picking, even though you could call that weak STEAM maybe, but the strong STEAM, the real STEAM, would actually have some characteristics, some form of all of these principles within them. So it emphasizes the different cultures, putting them on equal footing, it's process-driven. You actually are allowed to fail, it's quite often fast, it has to have a safe space, it is inclusive, the radical openness is really critical, being open to reflection, experimentation, all things I think that were actually raised across ISEA2022 a lot are in there. And even though I think still that acronym is not the best one or most accessible one for many, for those coming from STEM or those from art and feeling that really there is so much benefit in working together, it is becoming quite a big funding mechanism now, and also label that is, I think, spreading. Do you pick up that?
Yeah, so when we started mapping the approaches at each of our institutions, we kind of came across sort of 4 intersections of what is a STEAM approach. Most of the approaches that we implemented cover multiple of these intersections, we call them. And so these were behavior, cultures, engagement, and space. So each of these was... maybe you can go on to how we developed each of those.
I think, again, picking them out was maybe a bit tricky. We just looked at what... because there were very different approaches. So coming across, we come from different institutions, very different ways of actually bringing arts and sciences together. But then we also felt that just lumping all the methods and approaches as one is very confusing. So we looked at the different approaches and tried to find what were key aspects that were really important and sort of the main driver for having come up with this specific approach. So for some, for example, it was that it is that different behavior, that openness, that the way we work together, the way it's inclusive, that is important, but that then can also link with culture. So sometimes the boundaries between these labels can also be a little bit tricky, but we try to define each, and sort of the cultures is, in a way, it is a different type of working, but then also the engagement means that who do you actually include? So you can't just have maybe one art, what kind of arts? Is it arts and design again? We had to clarify that. But then not just within academia or within the research context, but also outside. And I think that was the key, because there's this link with society. If you want to address societal challenges, you should not just hide in your own silo. So the engagement really was then also how do we involve our own management, our own senior management, our administration, and then go beyond our basically institutional doors. And this space was an important one because there's not just safe space, but also the way we facilitate this working may need a different format than what our organization is used to use as a prototype.
So each of these intersections were sort of areas that you need to be very conscious of when developing or implementing these STEAM curricula or approaches, so that the different way of interacting with each other, the different sort of communication styles when you have engineers, scientists, and artists working together or learning together you really need to sort of adapt and be conscious of how they are learning and the different ways they've had maybe in their sort of discipline-focused studies earlier, learn to kind of work in group, work together. Cultures is also being very conscious of the different types of thought styles, the different ways of sort of evaluating types of knowledge, the different ways of sharing and transferring that knowledge. So these things are also things that you need to be conscious of, and especially following this last session, often the embedded biases that you come when working together from each of those cultures. Often because STEAM had art sort of like thrown in there as a sort of like protest originally at the germination of this terminology, there is sometimes often an art bias when we are working with STEAM, and we don't sort of like really look at it as a transdisciplinary equal actors that are interacting with each other. So I think that's also that we need to be conscious that STEAM often comes also within the art culture as well. And yes, engagement in space. I think Claudia also spoke very well on this. Each of these approaches were demonstrated in our handbook, so I also won't go into them all detail now, but it's on our website, steaminnovation.org. There's a bit of an overview, but I don't know if you can read it on the screen from each of the different partners' approaches. And sort of, this is just an idea of one of the approaches from Aalto University. But I will now jump into the next, which will again look more about sort of STEAM and defining it, and also how it's kind of interlinked and integral to sustainability as well. So I'll ask Claudia to follow that.
Yeah, it's just a quick overview. So we actually didn't promise academic publications, but there were opportunities and we grasped them, and it was actually very good for us to anchor it in the academic context and in terms of what's happened elsewhere. So our work now, we basically did some research when we wrote the proposal, but then in 2 years a lot can happen. So us, like also was emphasizing the STEAM specific session in previous day on Tuesday afternoon, that there's relatively a lot done in primary and secondary school, but less in higher education. So we then really looked at it critically, why is that, but what is already proposed, and how does our work in a way fit in, and maybe begin sort of to become a talking point and a forum for discussion and reflection. So we basically did that, but we didn't just stop there. We also increasingly reflected on what is the link to sustainability? Sustainability as a subject area actually to help bring together the different disciplines and different work, especially in a student-staff context. I think sustainability is almost in any course you could find a link, and that could be differently defined and different emphases, but it brings people together. And also in terms of the transdisciplinarity, because it is difficult to do, but sometimes, we need to sort of make headway for that. So this is just to emphasize the differences, and I just did that graph, and whether it's right or wrong. I mean, so far I had good feedback, but I don't know whether you can relate to it. But I think very often we talk about cross and multidisciplinary, and I think multidisciplinary in particular is literally just, you still work a little bit in your professional expertise, there's nothing wrong with that, but then you try and bring it together sort of at the end. And it can be okay, and there might be many situations where that is useful. But interdisciplinary, then it sort of blurs the boundaries more, and you try and really come together from the start, and you may already start using different methods and approaches, because it does make sense to do a fusion or be more experimental rather than just draw things together at the end. So this is already different. But then the transdisciplinary, the way I was initially introduced to explanation was just to draw on people beyond your discipline, beyond university or academia. But I don't think that holds enough strength, actually. What is in the literature, in the wider literature, and what is really promoted, that it is, yes, through working with the external stakeholders, is already maybe not the best term, but with engaging with society, with communities, with other actors in the field, you then have sort of more blurred identities. You come in there as an expert, you come in there as a citizen, you come in as under different identities yourself, but also because you work together much more complex, all these boundaries become actually blurry. And therefore, the way you look at things opens different perspectives. And I think it can also be very chaotic. And it might be different shades, and you may change those shades. And then going back, what I did for the paper on STEAM, this is just a STEAM characteristic. So this, I would not claim it is exhaustive, but it was some of the key literature relating to higher education and what kind of specific characteristics they highlighted. And you will find that most of the key ones, you can bunch them up, that our definition that we did intuitively and from experiential, sort of deductively beforehand, actually fitted that also quite well. So I think, therefore, since we used our definition and the principles, we don't really like calling it definition, call them more principles, they actually work very well in practice. But it will also be interesting to get feedback on the paper and maybe a critique and maybe somebody who really just slays it. Because I think, we're open for that. You have to be critical in the way. Maybe there's something really, really important missing in it, but we haven't heard yet. Yeah, this is then how we, in the most recent attempt, that was just in February, we, three of us, and I would just say the female balance is not bad in this project. It's actually very, very good. And there's a lot of the paper writing happened just also, this was just a 3 female author paper. And we just tried to look at, again, what was done in terms of the approaches and transdisciplinarity. So what were the common threads in terms of transdisciplinarity? And we just came up with those 5 themes in a way. It was in a thematic analysis. It was a very initial sort of framing of it and thinking about it. And I know challenge solving, I don't think solving is the best word, but take it with a pinch of salt. It's because we try and address challenges. But again, I think the points that come up in terms of the focus and the strategies hold a lot of traction with what was raised over the last 5 days that I heard. And in that sense, I think it also gives then us a little bit more clarity.
So now you just give a bit of an overview of some of our methodologies that we've developed within the project or have been using previously. I will start with a method that I developed called Archetype Expectation Management. This was developed in response to a residency program that I was managing, where we invited scientists to be resident in artist studios, so an inverse model of artists and scientists. It's called Studiotopia. And it was a key thing that I discovered. It was a 17-month residency, so the scientists and artists had never worked together. There was an open call for the scientists. They responded. We had then interviews with the artists and kind of did a matchmaking process, and eventually started up. And then they had 17 months to sort of work together. It wasn't production focused, although there was this sort of request for some sort of documentable output, but we didn't expect them to do an artwork, but just to sort of be conscious. We would like to see what they've been up to. Originally the program was designed to have 6 sort of meetings and visits to the artist studio where the artists would come, but with COVID coming, that completely disappeared, and it just became sort of rolling Zoom meetings and a very sort of ongoing long process of just kind of trying to find a point of common ground, which was not too hard with the artists and scientists in terms of working out what sort of research interests or topics they had that aligned, and they could develop a project idea. But one of the things that I was conscious of, like halfway into the program, that there was very sort of different understandings of who each other was and the different roles that they had and the expectations they had with working with each other. So the traditional archetypes of what the artist does and what the artist is, and also vice versa for the scientist. And so I developed a short, 2-day workshop program in response to this that should have been implemented at the beginning of the residency to kind of very much break down and also unravel and reveal these different understandings that they have of each other's sort of thought styles and production cultures and different ways of working that like these things were often unsaid, but these sorts of biases were embedded in the way that they worked with each other, and it did kind of start to cause trouble over time. So I thought this was something that would be quite useful to deal with head on straight away. So the program's like two workshop days. It depends on how many researchers or project people are involved in the project. It can take longer. But it's like focused basically adapts to a lot of UX design principles, and especially empathy mapping, and asking each of the different researchers, artistic researchers and scientific researchers, to sort of like start doing a journey, start creating what we call a user journey of each other, of what they expect the archetype of the scientist to do, and what the artist does, and also how they live and how they feel. And this is done, they do it of each other, and then they do it of themselves, and then they kind of have this comparison next to it, and you see straight away these sort of distinctions that kind of come across, these stereotyping that happens. And it's quite a sort of sensitive activity to undertake, like as always when doing any sort of like role-playing activity, but it does break down these barriers, and it brings the people who are working together, who haven't worked together before and who come from different types of disciplines and different ways of working. It does sort of bring them, wipes the slate clean, in a sense that they can kind of then actually sort of empathize and understand, and then retry to work out how they should develop the best way that they can like work together. And this is also to kind of emphasize also this difference between interdisciplinary project work or transdisciplinary project work. The notion was that they developed the research question or the project together at the beginning. So as opposed to what happens usually in art and science collaborations, where the artist instrumentalizes the scientist or the lab or the science in a sense, and uses the science in effect as a media, or as scientists that came into the program often would have liked to instrumentalize the artist as a way to communicate the art. The idea was to really work out how to work at the beginning with all of the expertise and approaches, and try to work together and intertwine from the very beginning. And this what I think is one of the key things of a transdisciplinary approach, and also where we see STEAM should be a transdisciplinary way of thinking that can sort of bring in different expertise or disciplines, not anti-disciplinary, just a kind of overarching sort of web that can kind of bring these different disciplines and ways of working together. And yes, so this method will also be on the website to have a look at in more detail, and also to implement yourself if you would like. And now ask Robert to follow with his method.
Yeah. Thanks. I'm coming from Dresden Technical University. It's a full university, though I'm myself in a chair for industrial design engineering, and as designers, we are also always right in the middle between those STEAM thoughts and the arts. So we kind of see ourselves as connectors already between, and kind of also as initiators of projects, and as a catalyst, because we see sometimes a bigger picture than most of the participants in their parts. So coming in this project, we already thought like we have most of our homework done, and we kind of know how it works. But as it turned out, this was not the way at all. So already before this project, we started with changing our attitude, our culture. So coming maybe from a rather user-centered design view, we already moved to a human-centered design. So taking into account not only the user, but also the people who are affected by products that are not using the products. And with this project, what we also did, we kind of expanded even further, and kind of looked into environmental issues. And this is actually then what we also with this project started to implement, or side by side started to implement, and maybe a quote that will kind of show what we saw as a problem can be seen here from Wilson. The real problem of humanity is the following. We have Paleolithic emotions, medieval institutions, and godlike technology, and it is terrifically dangerous as it is now approaching a point of crisis overall. So we took that kind of stance and thought, well, we have to go beyond and kind of connect or interconnect these different issues and approach these challenges, these societal challenges, and switched into a planetary-centered design, which we are now approaching, and founded Center for Humane Technology. The name may change, so don't take that for granted yet. But we're looking into inter- and transdisciplinary research between the nexus of technology, society, environment, and here we want to not only do this research and then whatever, like put out products and so on and so forth, but the idea is to take this back into education. So this STEAM project really fits well as we want to go back into that, and plus we want to get of course society involved and go ahead with more participatory designs. So we're coming from a design thinking mainly research formally. So this is what Claudia also mentioned with the DT Uni project, that this is how we got to know most of the people that are, or no, some of the people that are working in the project, not most of them. Yeah, you're right. Though this kind of framing in design thinking is always often following a rather fixed design process. It's iterative, okay, yeah, that's fine, but it's mostly a fixed way of dealing and with rather a closed facilitation, and the outcomes that you produce are kind of predictable in a way once you've done a couple of these workshops and a couple of these processes. So just a side note, most of those templates that I'm showing are design from a digital design from Miro. That's COVID-based because we had to do a lot of workshops digitally. Usually we like to do this in person. So with the STEAM context in the back, what we did, we kind of changed our preconceptions with this, as we thought we have to open this kind of method when we are bringing in people from different disciplinary backgrounds, from the arts, from science, but also from sociology. So we did a workshop on artificial intelligence with people from really different disciplinary backgrounds, and we thought that it would be nice to have a framework for example for the engineers who would like to really rely on some kind of set of boundaries. But for the more artistic participants, we thought we should let it a little bit more open so they don't feel as much cornered in this process. And so we developed a basic framework, but let the facilitators decide themselves with the group what kind of method is appropriate at a certain time. And with this workshop, this worked really well within the STEAM project. And we did a couple of other different things, like a really nice onboarding process where the people had to reveal some personal information, not really personal, but more like what kind of attitude they have. So maybe put in a quote that they like, so other people kind of know where this person is going to, but it's not really a personal information. And also we in the STEAM project, we did a hacking process where we took methods that are well established, for example, in design thinking, and we kind of switched them. And for this, we developed a future timeline that we used in this particular workshop, where we kind of went back into the past, looking at AI development. So the participants had to select certain points of reference where they thought this is important. Then looking into the future of what they would predict what could happen within that certain topic, and this kind of helped the participants to like sort out where am I, where stand I, where is the other one going, and what does the other one think. And it made it way easier in the upcoming process to work together, because everybody was already kind of knowing where the other one is going or not. Okay, so this is one part where we use this STEAM approach to kind of change and switch our approaches. Another one is we are really well doing prototypes and demonstrators. Like, we are product designers. We use this all the time for different aspects. But one thing that we now kind of changed is in one part this public and this participatory element. So we want to use those prototypes not only for ourselves and kind of like here's the problem, solve it, here's the prototype, make it handy and nice, but also show that to the public. So we're going out now and presenting those prototypes and to a broader audience, put it in context, and also we want to use those prototypes to make either other scientists in interdisciplinary context or the public share our experience and understand, and also give input on an easier kind of way, so they have better access to the topic. So we're looking then into some kind of like learning engagement. So this is a field we are invested in now, and also when we're trying to develop those projects, we're trying to look at it as a so-called boundary object, so that it is an object where lots of people can share a discourse and get invested in the whole process. And this is then connected to a new space that we are occupying. There's a Kulturpalast, a cultural palace in Dresden, which is like, as it says, it's culture based. So there's an orchestra in there, a library, and we just acquired a rather small, but I think an important space there that we can use to link to the artists who are working in this space and to our research plus the audience. So we want to use this place as a place for exchange and debate and for the transformation of society, using our concepts and using our objects. So then it's to develop interactive research objects to let the people participate and to kind of look at futures, at possible futures. And for that, we use the Center of Humane Technology also, where we have groups and people from different backgrounds. And here's one example that we want to use is to have simulations created where people can actually easily access an idea of a possible future. And maybe you can use here, if you want to go back, the cupola of the dome of this culture palace to kind of project ideas into the future for the audience, and then let them kind of evaluate or add something to it. And the final idea would be maybe to have a kind of a data observatory. Sorry, that died on me. a data observatory where the idea is coming from a 19th century observatories, which were a place of gathering of scientists and general audience, and maybe we can relive that kind of idea by making data and possible futures visible for the audience.
So there's this good space link in terms of the Dresden place and Birmingham place, because Birmingham City University has also something called STEAM House, and it is a physical place. And initially, it was an old building that was refitted with a maker space and meeting spaces. And to be honest, when you went in there already as an academic, it felt like sort of more networking friendly, more social spaces. It felt good. You felt more creative. But we've gone a step up. So there was an old building in the background, very nice, which you see there. So the facade was maintained, because Birmingham is an old production town, lots of interesting buildings. So because that was protected, had I think it was a second grade protection listed building. But behind it now, we modernized it, and this is our new STEAM house. And the idea is that so I'm part of a faculty with computing in it, so computing actually will take residence in it, not all of us, not engineering, interestingly enough, just computing. But it is open for others to hire spaces, to do things, to exhibit things, and it's important also, it invites small and medium enterprises to rent some space, be there, and interact with students and staff and research. The makerspace is amazing, the printing facilities, the different working facilities for making things, and so, but it's just being open. So we used it first for our Innovation Fest, where we showcase student work and bring in alumni and other people to engage and comment on the work. But I want to focus on something very, very simple. So I bring it back to all the fancy stuff they said, and how you can also bring it back to something quite simple that actually works. So we did, our method that we hacked and went through certain reflective processes, we tried to use some of the design thinking aspects and try to bring in the STEAM principles in a time-constrained environment, because we felt staff are time-constrained, students are time-constrained. So if you want to expose them to STEAM and give them a taster and try and at least experimentally start using it, it has to be something that fits into 3 1-hour lunch break hours or into a half-day workshop, 3.5 hours, 3 to 3.5 hours. That was our decision. And also what we wanted to be as inclusive as possible. So in COVID, we had to then translate it also online, and we said, maybe you should even choose an avatar or something, your names, you don't even have to switch the camera on. Because sometimes when you see somebody in their 50s or 60s or somebody with a grey beard, you think, they must know more than me, or they're Professor blah, blah, blah. This is actually not good. Yeah, well, assumptions, isn't it? I know, it could be Professor lady blah, blah, blah. But this is actually unhelpful. So we thought, just having a name or initial, just the voice is actually good. And don't necessarily always introduce yourself, because when you physically see, you immediately make a judgment, whether you like it or not. Subconsciously, you make a judgment. Now, online, the advantage is you don't have to switch your camera off. It's maybe a bit impolite, but it also gives you this equality. And for us, equality was very important of voice. So therefore, all the methods we chose had to have equality, where everybody could participate as much or as little as they felt, but also somebody who was less vocal would have advantage to make their voices, their ideas heard, seen, read. So we drew a lot on design thinking methods, interesting enough. So because under the previous project, we produced brainstorming is not a new method at all, but it is part of it because it's a very effective method. But there was something called brainwriting. And brainwriting basically is you have a brainstorming, you see, oh wow, there's lots of interesting things out there. We also tried, actually should start at the beginning. You start with actually reflecting yourself. What do you think about a certain topic? So we asked 3 or 4 questions and you just sort of think about it yourself. Then you have a brainstorming and discussion, and you think also, what information don't we have about this subject area? And we found that is important about STEAM. Yes, we bring certain people into the room, and some are more from an arts background, some are more from engineering, some are more from planning, whatever it is, but we all actually also have gaps, huge gaps. So that should be brought in. And then you should look at it and then discuss in terms of that set topic area, which in our case was just sustainability for our university. What could that look like? What could we do? What is needed? Then they were basically discussing that, and in that discussion, then at the end, you choose and formulate your own idea of what you think would really be super to do. We also felt you have to be enthusiastic about it and you have to own it in a way. You have to want to do it, not have to do it. So we did that, and then that then goes into the brainwriting. And the brainwriting is you write down your idea, and then you take it clockwise. So 5 participants in each group, 4 to 5, it works best, 5 is really good. And then you just you write down the idea, you pass it out, and the next person comments on it constructively. So they could either say, have you thought about this? Or this could be added, or this links with that. And then again, you turn it around. So by this time, you have to read 2 previous people's entries, the idea and the comment, and you add an additional comment. So by the time you get it back, you have your own idea and 4 comments. And then you can refine your idea, and it's great. It should be very quiet, not that always people are quiet. But it is a very good way. We found it very, very effective for actually creating ideas. And it also forces you to reflect and take different people's ideas on board in a very sort of organic, nice way. And then basically come up, then vote on an idea, and that could be either one of these 5 ideas. But sometimes also we found there were connections. They said, actually, we want to mesh 2 of them we like best and just make them into a new idea. And then we spent another half an hour or so at the end where we have the radar diagram, and you just ask 4 questions, who should be the stakeholders, what are the resources needed, what might be the barriers, or in the 4th question, whatever you think is important. And then what you put in the center of the bullseye is the really important immediate actions, and what you put more out is the less important or maybe nice but not necessary. And then you can also work with that. So this is just to show the minutes. It's very fast-paced, scarily fast. But it's also the facilitator, and in fact, is sort of like a participant, so it's not overtly, which I think is also good for equality. So a lot is just in the instructions, very clear, quite simple, fast. I think that was it.
And also, we also have a few other partners as well that have developed curricula as well for students and a lot of different outputs. And this is just a taste of some of the ones from our own institution. So I would really recommend checking out our website to get an overview. These are tools that you can use, you can take, and they're really good to play with. Especially on project work, but also when you're running classes and that have different expertise in different disciplines. So, any questions?
Sorry. Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. I have one question. We use design thinking techniques for the design of the strategy of the program, of the bioinfo for human program. But listening to you, I was thinking, can we use this design thinking for trying to understand why men do not came to the activities that we develop, the women organizations develop? What happens with this to identify the problem?
Well, okay, it's not working. I say, yeah, of course. You can use design thinking with any kind of problem you want to tackle. The main importance is what are the people that are present, and I think if you don't have those men in those workshops doing the design thinking, you're not going to really know what's going on. So you have to have these interdisciplinary groups. You have to have those people present that you want to have a look at. I think that is important. Yeah. Well, you want to
just a quick comment. So, for example, the technique I just presented, I used it for second-year undergrad students and male and females who opted in from staff. It was just an open call and whoever came. But I also recently used it with a high-level faculty and university workshop, and there were a lot of, it's still male-dominant in my institution. And it was interesting for me to see whether they engaged or not, and all but one who just was a bit flitting, all engaged very, very well. So it can, I think, the design thinking, sort of the broadening eye coming together, and that sort of thing. They did not shy away. So in my sense, what I found in terms of gender, but also in terms of seniority, actually sort of a design thinking underlying principle in my experience has worked actually very well. Sometimes people have aversions now when they see stick-it notes or big sheets and they're forced into something. And actually I had one participant, she explicitly said, and she's very senior, I do not want this. And I said, oh, come still along. And she also enjoyed it, and it was very productive. And I think it is exactly trying to find the methods, isn't it? And the workshops, it has to appeal to them in a way in terms of the topic, but also when it's then fluid and it creates ideas and you actually exchange, you hear something different. It doesn't just force you to do something you don't want to do because somebody said it, but it flows. I think the flow of these processes is really important, in instilling that openness, in instilling that trust, and actually making it work. And as I said, what surprised me, I did not expect it that method worked as well as it did, because it's just so basic, and it's also very fast. But we sometimes extended a bit because it sounds a bit too fast. So 4 hours would be ideal. But it is interesting to see that you can construct something, and when you think about the principles, it makes just have sort of an internal checklist almost, and also they invite, just make it, know your audience, tailor it to them. That's what we did. It kind of worked. It's not a promise, but it was more effective than we had hoped. Yeah, so encouragement.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks for the panel. It was very interesting. I have a comment for Robert. So you said that you were looking for a title for your center, right? For your project, like a planetary.
Yeah.
What is the name you have now?
Well, Center for Humane Technology. That's what we name it right now.
Okay. So, because have you heard of the concept of Earth system?
Again,
Earth
system. Yeah. Okay.
So I visited a couple of months ago in Vienna. A lab that is dedicated to that, like Earth systems science.
Okay.
So I was thinking that eventually Earth systems design can be like a good title for that. So I just want to
thank you.
Just a congratulations for your studies, because it's very necessary, because a lot of people is talking about STEAM approaches, but mostly in primary and secondary school. So, as you are so on the topic, I'd like to answer you, if you find right which difference there is in the acronyms between technology and engineering. Don't you feel there is a double position occupied by this field, or not? Technology is a medium, it's not a discipline. So I'm asking this question to everyone.
I would say also that it is a double up, definitely. This is also, we kind of prefer to use transdisciplinarity. This is why we use this coming up a lot. But it's for policy, this acronym. And technology is this innovation sort of imperative as well that kind of has to come through there. But so I think there's problems with that language, but also I think if you do think about it as not actually a discipline, but as this as like this entity that this extension of the human that we should be conscious of, it can be useful. I think especially often in when you're working on transdisciplinary projects, there always is technological aspects embedded in it, although not necessarily like disciplinary thinking in that sense.
Just to add to that, I think one way to clarify this also, I think engineering and technology, technology sometimes also interprets information technology and digital element more rather than engineering. Engineering doesn't have to be, it could be. So I think that digital element is also very interesting as part of STEAM, because I think that is very often highlighted, but you notice that none of our principles actually explicitly say digital.
Yeah. But technology is not only digital.
No, exactly. I know, no, but it's just, I think it depends exactly. Everybody interprets it differently. And even some see art, some see arts, some see art and design, then artistic is a design only. This whole debate we didn't actually find very useful, and we just said, let's just step back. We include what we want to include. So we also very quickly said humanities, social sciences. Sciences include social sciences, or some would already flinch, because in STEM that is not hard.
Yeah.
But for us, it was.
It was, yeah. Thank you.
As we wanted to open this space in the culture pulse, we looked for quotes, and there's a quote from Martin Heidegger, and he says, "The essence of technology is nothing technological." So maybe this as an answer. It's not about technical, it's not about engineering technology.
Yeah. Do you know there is a stream approach also with religion?
Oh,
I was so surprised, like, oh, wow.
Transdisciplinarity has a very strong also ethnic and religious element actually in its roots. So there's again very overlapping.
Okay,
Thank you.
so I think
Yep.
we have to rush.
Thank you very much. We have to rush for a flight, so unfortunately.